Chocolate? Chocolate! Chocolate!
Hello everybody, Chocolate Guy here, and welcome back to another countdown. Last year on Valentine's Day, we took a look at the best episodes of Season 2 from one of my favorite shows, Hey Arnold. This year, we're gonna do something similar. Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of the best shows of all time, but Season 2 is its best season, and one of my favorite seasons of any show. It's the most consistent, has the strongest highs, takes every element of the show that worked before, but pushes it in the best way possible. The characters and themes are some of the most well-written of any show, and the story just keeps building and building throughout the season, leading to some great stuff near the end of it, but the ride to get there is also just really amazing. This season tries to tackle so much, and succeeds at all of it with flying colors, making this world one of the most expansive and complex, along with making our characters some of the most real, along with best. And there are certain points in the season, because all of that, where I have no problems with any given episode. The season is truly a masterpiece, and after too long, I finally decided to continue making Avatar lists when I rewatched this season, because it is just that good. Now, while Season 2 has some amazing episodes, choosing which were the best ones were difficult, because there are so many stellar episodes that are all so close in quality. My top 10 to 8 could have all reasonably swapped order with each other in 20 different ways because of how similar in excellence all the episodes in that top 10 are. The episodes in the top half of this season aren't just close with each other, which made this list hard to make in and of itself, but the points that separate them to where they can land where they do are so minor. So I have to preference that I love nearly every episode this season, and it comes down to the most random crap of why I like an episode more than the other, which will make this a pretty fun list to talk about some of the best episodes of television, and why I prefer one over the other, and what my weird reasons being. I'll try to justify them as much as possible, but in the end of the day, it does just come down to which ones I prefer watching the most, and why. So, I do love this season so much, and the episodes are very close, and because of how close they are, I will be talking about all of them in this video. All 15 that didn't make the list will be in the honorable mentions, and I will give each a ranking so you can see exactly where they stack up compared to each other. I really want to give the most full analysis of this season I possibly can, which is why I've remained so vague on specific details of the season, and have only talked about general reasons why I think it's so good, because I want to talk about all of it and actually elaborate on those points by going through each episode. This is why I decided not to do a top 10 list, even though I could have, because I want to talk about everything in one big video, and the list is gonna be long enough, so I don't really think there needs to be more parts to it. So that's what I'm gonna do today. Let's give praise to the episodes that make this season one of the best. Here is my list of the top 5 best Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 2 episodes. The Chase barely made it on the list over some of its competitors because of how engaging it is. This episode has one hook, and it's a damn good one. Team Avatar is being tracked day in and day out and cannot sleep until they find a way to take this threat down or find a way to escape. The plot is fantastic on its own, and it makes the episode very engaging as we slowly build up to who this threat is, how long our characters go without sleep, and them trying to figure out why they're able to be tracked so easily and how to stop it. And it leads to a pretty fun ending series of events and a dramatic episode from start to finish that really makes you feel for our characters and makes you want them to get out of this situation so they can finally get some sleep. But that's not what made this episode engaging enough to put on the list. What did that for me were two things. Between all this tension, you have great character dynamics being explored, some more subtly and bluntly, and you also have amazing action, with those two final fight scenes, especially the final one. Let's start with the character dynamics, because that's the main draw of this episode. Through this great plot, the episode uses that to show off our characters at their most tired and worn out, bringing certain aspects of their character to life. Specifically, Toph. She's having a hard time fitting into the group. After all, this is the first episode after her introduction. Mostly, she's having a hard time with Katara, but being the odd one out to an extent with Aang as well, which is made worse and brought to life by the fact that everyone is tired and getting on each other's nerves. This is shown off so well and makes Toph a much stronger character, specifically because of her conversation with Iroh, which is one of the best scenes in the show. How Toph falling out with the team is similar when you boil down the reasons to Zuko leaving Iroh, and how this weird parallel is explored while developing both their characters more while showing off how important the people in your life can be and how they can leave an impact. It's a nice calm in such a crazy episode and strengthens the theme of the episode. The other character dynamic that is explored here, specifically in the final fight, so I'll move on to that, is the dynamic between Azula, Aang, and Zuko. How they have all been chasing each other and are in a very different situation and have different reasons for why they want to defeat each other, but their stories are so interconnected and Aang and Zuko's directly parallel each other. And how this is the first time you see the three of them together. The dynamic and the tension between that is shown off by a crazy battle between the three, which is amazing as the three of them are fighting each other, but slowly Zuko loses the fight and everyone rejoins and their goals all change to take down Azula. And this is what I'm talking about, the parallels between Zuko and Aang's story. Zuko's arc and his connection with Aang is one of the best parts of Season 2. And I'll talk about it a ton in this video, but even with the connections, they only directly interact twice in the season, and here it's used to prove how connected their stories are perfectly, through their team up as the team and Toph's conversation with Iroh earlier. But Zuko's side of things has to come to a tragic end with Iroh getting hurt, while the gang get a happy ending with them finally sleeping. But yeah, this is a crazy intense episode that develops our characters, shows what really motivates them and drives them, gives us an amazing action scene or two while telling a great story along with some truly wonderful character moments, especially Iroh and Toph scenes, and that divided ending. It also really encapsulates what the first 7 episodes were setting up and puts into motion the next chunk of the season. This makes it a very important episode of the season where nearly every episode is great and feels important, but this one especially so. This was all enough for it to land on the list above some other exceptional episodes I had fewer reasons to put on here, even if it was insanely close, and there were multiple ones too. But the other 4 episodes on this list made a stronger case to be higher. Strap yourselves in, we're just getting started. This is the episode on the list I could see the most people questioning me on putting it this high or even on the list at all, especially compared to what I left off, and especially putting it over something like The Chase. There are so many fantastic episodes in this season. How could this little look into Ba Sing Se, which is more of a setup to bigger episodes, beat out such good choices? Well, it's simple, because it's not just a little look at this city. It's a crazy, expansive look at it. I've never seen a show break down such a big location and look at every in and out of it from the culture, to the social divide, to the role the city and each part of it plays, while also leaving such a mystery around everything and making you want to dive into it more, to figure out what's really going on in the city on the inside that looks so big and friendly on the outside, but on the inside is a case of what's wrong with the entire Earth Kingdom. And the episode slowly builds up to that, showing us every aspect of the city until you get to the big reveal at the end of what's really going on, and it's truly frightening for multiple reasons. Because you realize this is why the Earth Kingdom in general is as corrupt and divided as it is during the war, and it leaves you on a crazy cliffhanger where you don't know where they're gonna take this story next after all this new information. I find the way this episode breaks this location down really clever and interesting, and I'm a sucker for some good world building. So the fact that they go this in depth is the main reason it's here. It's truly remarkable how big they make Ba Sing Se feel, and how they do such a good job setting the city up just to tear your expectations down, while leaving you questioning what's next after both Zuko and Aang's plot play in to showing the mystery and weird aspects of the city, along with the corruption. The Avatar team is treated as honored guests while they want to try to talk to the Earth King about the eclipse and Appa, but are stopped at every turn because everyone is too afraid to even mention the war going on and are treated as tourists and aren't really taken seriously. Their request for an audience with the Earth King is ignored, and when it's put through, they're not even sure if they're gonna get it after waiting for it to get put through in the first place. Zuko and Iroh, on the other hand, are treated as poor refugees, working in the poorer side of the city, while Jet tries to prove that they are Fire Nation, and both these plots are greatly used to show off how the city operates and the weirdness of certain things from what has been set up, but slowly builds to a horrifying realization. And that's what really pushes the episode over the top for me, but another element that is great is the comedy. This episode is insanely funny, with just how creepy it all is, Team Avatar's interactions, and Iroh and Zuko living this new life, oblivious to the fact that Jet is trying to prove they are Fire Nation. But the ending is why all this information and world building we get on Ba Sing Se works to create such a great episode and really sells this one for me. So the gang sneaks into a party where the Earth King is attending, and after some hijinks which are pretty funny, they miss the Earth King and are confronted with Long Feng, who we saw earlier but realize is the Earth King's second in command and the true person who runs the city and the Dai Li. He believes it is his duty to keep the city together and at peace, to hold the traditions and culture he sees fit as what the city should be, and to not mention the war or involve the city in it, to not ruin his perfect image of what this city should be, the last truly safe place on Earth. And he will do anything to keep up order and to make sure his city stays safe and divided to maintain it how he thinks it should end up. And while this is going on, you see Jet, who is captured, getting brainwashed into thinking there is no war. And if that wasn't creepy and disturbing enough, Long Feng tells them if they tell anyone about what is going on here, that he will kick them out of the city, and that may mean they will never find Appa, who they think is here. The fact that Team Avatar even has the slightest suspicion of Appa being in the city means that they can't leave or do anything, which shows that Long Feng has them right where he wants them, in checkmate. It's such a good ending, as I've said. It leaves you wanting to know more about what Long Feng is doing, and if he has Appa or if Appa is in the city, and to see our team take him down after all this crazy stuff, but they can't, because he deadlocked them in a position where they can't move. It's one of the best endings of the show and sets up the final arc of the season perfectly. And the final moment where a new lady comes in claiming to be Judy and escort them out is just one last little creepy moment that perfectly encapsulates the entire episode and ends it on a perfect note. I will also say, Long Feng is also a great and very complex character for what his views on order are in the city, and why he wants to run the city like this to keep up his weird view on what the city is, or what he has made it during these hard times in the war, and keep that vision alive. But once again, it's what this says about the Earth Kingdom as a whole, that the king is a puppet and the one in power has put all his resources to controlling this one main city, the capital. And after seeing the Earth Kingdom being such a mess and so divided throughout this entire season, it's so cool to see why, and to see Ba Sing Se, the biggest and claiming to be the best city, the most safe and most united city, be exactly the same. It's one of the best moments, which makes this one of the best written seasons of television and makes for one of the best episodes. But there are still 3 more to go, including one of the best character studies from any show, which was enough to beat this one out. And on that note, speaking of, this episode being on the list should not be a surprise to literally anyone. This might just be the most popular episode of Avatar, next to The Storm and Sozin's Comet, and one other episode we will get into soon. Honestly, the only surprise here is that it's not higher, but once you see what topped it, you probably won't complain. But yeah, I love this episode too, and it's one of the best episodes of the entire show, and just gets better and better the more I watch it. Unlike the last episode, I think this episode's appeal is not only very simple, but something that is universally appealing. It's just a great character study of this tragic character at his most conflicted and alone, while also slowly showing off the true evils of the Fire Nation and the Earth Nation at a high and low level respectively, showing why Zuko is the way he is, and how his banishment, but also his upbringing and the tragic events that happened to him when he was younger, affected him and shaped who he is. And how the situation he is going through right now has striking similarities to the story we cut back to. It's the reason it's on his mind, but they're so different as well, and the story uses this to make some very interesting points. I love that Zuko is alone in this episode, like actually alone. It's the only episode in the entire show not to involve Team Avatar, and Zuko does not have Iroh to talk to here. He holds this story along with new characters we're introduced to, and I think it goes a long way to make Zuko's changing mind feel more meaningful and important, because he is struggling with what to do by himself with no familiar faces when he is put in this situation. It makes the bond he forms with this family, and especially this kid, feel very genuine. You understand why Zuko would feel attached and grateful to these people that not only were kind to him, but respected his privacy, and he grows to care about them as he sees them getting bullied by these soldiers. And this time of him being conflicted and confused takes us back to a time where he thought he knew everything he wanted. We get to see the relationship he had with his family, but especially his mom, and the unfortunate circumstances takes that all away from him, and starts a new era of the Fire Nation on top of that, on a grand scale and a more personal one at that, Seeing Zuko trying to gain full acceptance from these people and help them when their son gets taken away by those soldiers, and fighting them not because they are Earth Nation and they could harm him, but because he cares for this Earth Nation boy, which is slowly explored throughout the episode. Well, we also get to see how the Fire Nation has wronged him. So all this combined makes him feel for this family and show him that all the nations are similar besides culture and imaginary boundaries, which is one of the main themes of this season, and this is a pivotal moment because they don't directly address this, but you're able to see through his actions that this is a conclusion he kind of comes to. And it's such a pivotal moment in Zuko's development when he starts figuring this out on his own. But it also shows some of the similarities between the Earth and Fire Nation, developing the other main theme of the season, just how divided the Earth Nation is. And if all this wasn't interesting enough, and this episode didn't tackle so many interesting things, while having a great story that is one of the best character study episodes I've ever seen, the ending is bone-chillingly heartbreaking. Zuko comes to terms that he can help these people, and after a fun battle, realizes he has to use his powers, and comes to terms with who he is through his past, and reveals himself to all these people, but those same people reject him for the same reasons he rejected Earth Nation people in the past. And after seeing him grow this bond and fight to help him, seeing the kid in particular reject him breaks my heart. And after seeing him come to terms with his past and present, he still walks away into the future alone and confused, just as he did in the past. This episode is remarkable. It's such a powerful character study and does so much for the story, even if the City of Walls and Secrets also does. But this episode just goes much further with what it tries to do and is more universally appealing, and I just get into Zuko's story more than I do with the world building in that episode, even if obviously they're both great and very close in quality. There is no other episode from any other show like this one, and it's truly one of the best looks into any character from any show, and is a crowning achievement of Season 2. But it's not the best this season has to offer. There were 2 episodes that barely beat it out for very different reasons. This is such a weird one, because looking at this episode, you could see this as a bunch of simple stories, some of which aren't that interesting, that don't further the overall story at all besides one thing at the very end, and the only thing in this episode people really care about at first glance is one great scene with Iroh. And while you could look at it like that, I think you're wrong and foolish to pass up on what is one of the best episodes of the entire series. Nearly every element is why this episode is great, because this episode above all else shows why Avatar is one of the best shows, by taking such a simple concept in so many simple stories, but making them some of the most entertaining or moving watches, because these characters are some of the strongest in all of television. They are just so well written, dynamic, and for lack of a better term, real. This feels like a real world. These feel like real people going about their day-to-day lives. And the fact that this episode breaks that barrier between you and your TV screen cements how much you care about them, and does make these stories all the better. Also, I think the point about not moving the overall plot along very much is actually a good thing, because it allows us to spend more time on our interesting characters going about their day-to-day lives, but it also makes the episode more interesting because it comes right after the City of Walls and Secrets. And that amazing cliffhanger. So it's just such a striking contrast with seeing our characters just living in the city because that's all they can do, and it makes this episode more interesting in context because you know what just happened before it and why they can't really do anything else. But yeah, the main reason this episode is great is because it's just 6 small stories about our characters that are interesting because of how engaged we are in their lives and who they are as people. Also, this is just a very interesting setting for this kind of episode to take place in. It's one of the most interesting watching experiences because, as I've said, in a rare case where an episode can transcend that weird barrier between you and your TV screen, but also because such a simple episode that doesn't really even develop most of our characters at all manages to take you on a roller coaster of every possible emotion and back again because it's just such an interesting showcase of all of them. It can be funny, heartbreaking, cathartic, confusing, uplifting, and any other emotion you can think of. And I know that might sound kind of generic, but I genuinely mean it, and that's kind of the best way I can sum this episode up. It's something that can only really be understood if you watch it. I swear, this collection of stories takes you for a ride in a way no full story on this show does. Okay, maybe not any full story, but sometimes it does all these amazing things in the same story. Because it's just such a complete watch that is enjoyable from front to back, and I get so much out of the episode, while it also tries to do so much and succeeding at all of it. And every little aspect that Avatar usually does well is honestly at its peak here. The atmosphere, the character work, the animation, the soundtrack, and the pacing are all top-notch. And I especially love how it does just feel like we're seeing the lives of these interesting people. Other than one story at the end, they're all in random order, and I think that's what makes this episode work and makes it the complete package. And that is what makes the episode so effective that you never know when a story is gonna hit you really hard or when it's gonna be really funny. It doesn't have to start or stop in any particular way and can take you wherever it wants, just like life itself. Damn, this episode is so good. And I know I've spent a while talking about specifics, but I would be dumb not to briefly talk about the individual stories. Because while I have said most of what I want to say, in order to prove a lot of these points, I do need to talk about the individual stories, and it'll be fun to talk about which are my favorites and how they all add to make this a masterpiece. The tale of Toph and Katara is a great way to start this episode. It just shows Toph and Katara spending time with each other while strengthening their relationship after dealing with some bullies. It's actually really hard-hitting, and the ending conversation they have is really touching. It could come off as generic, but the fact that Toph is blind gives an interesting perspective here on what the story deals with. And the great writing, especially on Toph and Katara's relationship, making it feel very real and the conversations they have feel really genuine, brings it all home. The Tale of Iroh is obviously a masterpiece. I don't want to say anything because I'll just be repeating what's already been said before, but I will say it's the best and most quintessential story here. It's just Iroh living his life and helping people, and is so fun and uplifting until the final moment. It's so powerful, and is the best scene in all of Avatar because of the context that has been built up to before this episode, but also, even if you knew none of that, just seeing Iroh's tragedy here, after building him up to be just a genuine nice person who wants to help everyone, is earth-shatteringly sad that he tries to help everyone, but couldn't help his son. And now he is in the city that he tried to invade, that his son died in that war, and he is in there as a refugee and can finally see his grave again. And the presentation also helps to make this perfect, especially how they use this song in the episode in 2 totally different ways, and the second way just makes the scene all the more sadder. Truly, one of the best moments and scenes of the series. Aang's story might be the most simple here. It's just Aang helping animals, which might make this my least favorite, but it's still a lot of fun because of the presentation and how cool it is to see Aang do something involving things he is good at by helping people and animals after struggling so much this season, making this a very enjoyable watch. This is just a great showcase of Sokka's character and is really funny as well. Nothing more and nothing less. A great showcase of what Zuko has been struggling with near the end of the season through this date, and it's great. There's so many cute and funny moments, while also having some really interesting and revealing ones. You just want Zuko to find happiness, but he doesn't know what that is or how to obtain it, and it's truly tragic, which perfectly develops his character while being a fun story and leads to some interesting stuff later. This is a perfect way to end the episode because it feels like just a fun Momo adventure, and other than the fact that it's from Momo's perspective and there's no dialogue, fits right in with the other stories here and is a really fun way to end the episode, which is different than how most other episodes would end it, but also leaves on a great cliffhanger. But with all that said, even if this is a masterpiece and I love everything it has to offer, there was still one that was better. But before we get into what my favorite episode is from one of my favorite seasons, let's quickly go over all the other episodes of Season 2. To narrow the scope and to add more reasons as to why this season is just so good. Because nearly all the episodes are great, and they all add up to make this season what it is. And many of them were very close to making the list. So they deserve to be praised for that reason. I'm gonna go in season order, but you will see a ranking at the bottom of the screen. And I'm gonna try to go through this quickly because this video is long enough and I have a lot to say about my number 1. But it's Avatar Season 2 and there's a lot to talk about. So let's get into it. This is one of the few episodes while watching the season again that kinda shrunk on me. Well, I love the plot of this episode, and like how it not only develops what the Avatar state is, but sets up main themes and plot points of the season on both Zuko and Aang's end of this episode's story, while having great action and some stellar moments. But this episode is a little repetitive for my liking on how they go about Aang being pressured into using the Avatar state, and is a little too setup-y as well, which makes it less interesting and less memorable than some of the other episodes in this season, but these are very minor complaints, and it's still a great episode, but that is why it's lower amongst some truly stellar ones as well. I can see people disliking this one, but I actually really like it. Even if I'm not particularly crazy about it, I like the story and think this cave is a cool location, along with the episode being very funny, and some of the lore we do see here makes this one a great watch. Also, Zuko's stuff is cool because it's slowly developing his character in an interesting way and builds up to some stuff later. The episode can be a bit slow though, as it's not one of the most substance-heavy episodes in this season, and can fall back on cliches a little much and more than I really want them to, but they do have fun with these cliches, and it's shown to make a point about this cave. While this episode is nothing fantastic, it's still a great watch. This is my least favorite episode of the season, but I do really like it. Unfortunately, this is the one episode I have legitimate problems with. The story is pretty good for the most part, and it's cool that we get to see the city we once knew controlled by the Fire Nation, and Aang trying to find Bumi through all of this. I also like what Aang learns from Bumi, and the action is great here, but this episode is just tonally all over the place, and doesn't develop its ideas enough. So it's just a weird one and really leaves me wanting more, and I have a hard time getting into it because of that. This is a great episode with a fun mystery that not only shows off stuff about our characters, but also develops this world by directly addressing one of the main themes of the season. But it is just a little slow and kind of simple for my liking. Even if I think the themes are really complex and interesting, they don't go about them in the most complex way. And this is especially apparent compared to some of the other episodes in the rest of the season, but still a very interesting one. This episode is kind of slow, and not the most important or consequential. It's the only episode in the season that doesn't take itself very seriously, but if you can get past that, it's a pretty fun one that does develop the Earth Kingdom in an interesting way and has a lot of great jokes. So yeah, I do really like this one, even if it can't compare to when the season really takes itself seriously. This episode was a contender for the list, even if it landed a bit lower. I love what this episode says about disabilities and how Toph uses hers to become the best Earthbender, and how she is a perfect teacher for Aang and would love that, but can't stand to leave her parents because even if they don't understand her, she still loves them because they raised her, and accepts that they won't. But in the end, she does try to make them, and they still don't. And it's one of the best moments of the season for how much it shows off about Toph's character and how heartbreaking it is. Also, Toph is a great character in general, and all this leads to a fantastic introduction of her, and the action and comedy are top notch. The reason this isn't any higher is because other episodes do go further with their concepts, but this is truly something special. This is just a great training and world-building episode, after the craziness of the last one. Well, simple in story, how far they go with developing our characters and world through Zuko learning new techniques and Aang learning to earthbend is truly awesome. And what we learn about the world here is second to none world building, and a great development of the theme of the season, all things are connected, which was also explored in the swamp, but a bit more subtly and in an interesting way here. It is a repetitive episode, however, which did make it land a bit lower because I just enjoy watching it a teeny bit less than some other episodes. But that isn't really a problem, it doesn't really make the episode worse, and to an extent, they do use it to the episode's advantage to prove a very interesting point. This is just a great exploration of a cool location, and it moves the plot along in an interesting way. I don't really have much to say on it. I have no issues with the episode, but there's also nothing that pushes it over the edge compared to some others for it to land any higher. This episode is a very brutal showcase of Team Avatar after Appa is kidnapped, while trying to get out of the desert to hopefully find him, while at the same time, there is a fun Zuko plot. I love the story of this episode, and the twists and turns it takes, and it really bonds our characters together through Katara trying to keep them together at their lowest points. I also think the jokes are really funny while the emotional moments hit. You really get to see how close these characters are together and how Appa's absence truly affects all of them on a physical and emotional level, especially Aang. Zuko's plot is especially fun, which balance all of this out, and it all makes Aang's freak out at the very end all the more tragic. I will say that this episode does cover some familiar territory in places, making it less unique, but it is still an important episode that does a lot with what it tries to do, making that not a problem, but there are definitely many episodes this season that I do think are stronger. The Serpent's Pass is a great episode, but is the last episode of the season before we get into the Ba Sing Se arc, and every episode is near flawless. This is a fun journey while looking at some character stuff after the tough events of the last couple episodes, but it can be kinda slow for my liking, and it feels like we're retreading stuff a little bit to the point where it is kind of bothersome. But these things are minor, and the stuff they try to tackle still works, because they do try to expand these character dynamics and just our characters in general to make them more interesting and fleshed out, and touch on some stuff we haven't touched on for a while. But as I said, even with that, it still feels like retreading just a little too much, which does bring it down quite a bit. But it is still a great episode, and all the stuff it does really well is what makes it great. This is just a fun, action-packed episode that reveals a couple of new interesting things, but is mostly about stopping this huge threat in the most epic series of events, and it's awesome. It doesn't have a lot of interesting stuff going on besides that, but that is really all the episode is. It's just an amazing series of events that is really action-packed and intense with high stakes from front to back, which is why it's amazing. It doesn't need to have really anything else. It's just fantastic at what it tries to achieve. And while that may make me not like it as much as any other exceptional episode in this season, it is still one I have no issues with, and the stakes, pacing, and atmosphere are all exceptional, which is why it gets that title and is still an amazing episode. This was another episode that was very close to making the list, and when I've made this list previously in the past, it did. It's just such a good story that is very compelling by putting together all these pieces from the season we've seen before and adding new things through Appa's journey to show us where Appa has been all this time, while at the same time showing what Aang means to Appa and what Appa means to Aang. This is just a great story. It's beautifully told with little dialogue. You feel every step of Appa's journey and completely understand how he is feeling and what he's going through, which is just so amazingly done, and it makes you really want to see him get home. Well, you also see the seeds of bad things on the horizon, especially that amazing cliffhanger. It's just such a hard-hitting, artistic episode that is just as unique as Tales of Ba Sing Se, but on rewatch, there are other episodes I get more out of, or stories that engage me a bit more, but damn, this is so good, and it's so impressive, and any other season, this would have a shot at not only the top 5, but being number 1 of not just the season, but the entire show. But Avatar Season 2 and Avatar in general is a very different beast. I told you, the Ba Sing Se episodes are some of the best. This episode is just the gang finally making moves against the Dai Li and figuring out the rest of this conspiracy. Also, Zuko finally has to confront what he wants out of life after all the growth and stuff that has happened to him throughout the season. This episode is so engaging through many twists and turns, and delivers on what the season has been building up to so far, and delivers while leaving you on an unsure but happy note, because the gang has Appa back but has no idea what they're gonna do next involving the Earth Kingdom. The action, the mystery, and the payoff are all top notch. But you also have great character moments from Jet, and more specifically Zuko, which makes this one of the most complete episodes of the series. This is one of the most pivotal moments in the show, and how they handle it is beautiful. But there are ones on this list that are just a bit stronger. This episode, in a way, is kind of just set up to the final 2 episodes, but it is the best kind of setup, and there is some really interesting stuff here on top of that. finally showing the Earth King off, putting everything into perspective while leading to new issues, and all of this directly leads to the 2 amazing last episodes. It's just so interesting after everything that's happened, seeing the gang talk things out with the Earth King and set things right after all the corruption, just for things to go to shit for nearly everyone involved. Also, Zuko's stuff is some of the most interesting of the season, with him coming to terms with his decision that he made last episode, and it leads to some of the most powerful, introspective, and interesting moments, as well as leading right into the next episode in his plot's end. The fact that this episode is basically set up to better episodes does keep it much lower, but it is truly exceptional and does everything it tries to do amazingly well. And this is my bubble episode of the list. And I know it reveals what my number 1 is, but we'll get into that in a second. This is a great episode, however. Every element works, showing Aang and Zuko both figuring out how to achieve peace within themselves for 2 very different reasons, to do the right thing, while everyone else gets closer and closer to tragedy, as the main villains of the season team up to plot a coup on the Earth Kingdom. The episode is just a slow, interesting build of this event, while really looking into Aang's character and what he needs to do to control the Avatar state, and if that is worth it or not, while Zuko is just living life happy after finally accepting things in his life, but you know it won't last. And the episode's ending with Aang leaving because he is running away from his duties to save Katara because he won't give up his love for her, and after everything that has happened in the episode, good and bad, it perfectly leads into what is my So the reason the Guru is only a bubble episode is because everything that was great there is expanded on in this episode. And that goes for most of the elements and plot threads that made the season great. This is the perfect finale of one of the best seasons. Every main plot thread and theme gets an interesting ending, leaving you on one of the best cliffhangers and most depressing notes from any show. It's just seeing everything that has been built up throughout the season slowly get torn apart. How the characters were on the cusp of going forward with this great plan to finally take down the Fire Nation, and now they have to scramble to stop Azula and the Dai Li from staging a coup and taking over the entire Earth Nation, which would basically win the Fire Nation the war. It's so interesting to see the gang piece this together as it's happening, and to see Azula go through this plan, and see all our main characters work to achieve their goals in the most important mission yet, after an entire season of building up how important protecting Ba Sing Se is, and keeping it united. You just feel the stakes here. And they just get higher and higher as the episode goes on. But the episode also gets more personal and introspective as it goes on as well. For how big this conflict is, at the same time, it simply comes down to what our characters have learned throughout the season about the world, others, and themselves, and what choices they're gonna make at such a pivotal moment in all of their lives. And this cuts pretty much every way you think. Of Aang does whatever he can to save Katara and stop this thing by working with Iroh to help Zuko, who is also prisoner, even if he doesn't want to, but refuses to give in to controlling the Avatar state throughout most of the episode, even though he could use it to win, because he thinks other things he has grown to care about, like Katara, are more important, and he doesn't want to give his love up for her to save anyone, including her. Zuko finally tries to be happy living in Ba Sing Se with his uncle in this tea shop after the whole season of questioning his destiny and purpose in life just to get captured by Azula. But through this, sort of proves his character development in a way by having a real down-to-earth conversation with Katara, who used to be his enemy. showing her that he has changed and understand not only that he creates his own destiny, but the two of them share similarities. Something you could never see him understanding at the beginning of the season, but he does level with her about the loss of his mother, something that even if the situations are different, can both relate to. Even with the villain of the episode, Azula, who has been growing in ambition throughout the season, learning from her mistakes, now puts forward the most ambitious scheme of the show and has to manipulate and scare her way into power. Not only overthrowing the Earth King, but the true king, Long Feng, taking control of the Dai Li in a truly epic scene, putting in the final steps of her plan to take the city down. And while Toph and Sokka play minor roles in this episode, as they sort of got their big character moments last episode, especially Toph, who, even with all the great stuff in that episode, her learning metal bending is the best and most rewarding part of it. And she especially does get a better showcase there, which is the one thing I think that episode does better. But it is still cool to see Sokka make the choice to come here because he knows it's his responsibility, even if he wants to spend more time with his father. And it's cool to see him take charge to save the Earth King and try to help stop this plot, even if he doesn't end up doing a crazy ton. While also seeing Toph, who has just been at one of her lowest points in the last episode, to use her new ability that she learned there to help free her and her friends. Iroh also plays a great part in this episode as well. We see him continually try to move away from his past and create his own best future in a more subtle way than Zuko. Well, he pushes Zuko to do the same constantly throughout the season, but especially here. And when his new happy life with his nephew, selling tea at this tea shop he created, is challenged, unlike the last time when Ba Sing Se was in this much chaos, when he was the one trying to conquer it, this time he stands on the right side of history and works with Avatar to help prevent its downfall. It's such a cool detail, and this is what leads into the Crossroads of Destiny part of the episode. Zuko realizes that the scar does not mark him in a negative light to have to capture the Avatar and fulfill the destiny his father has set out for him, and is even given a chance to remove it, which symbolically would remove that mark of the banished prince altogether and remove what he considers a burden on him. But through an awkward series of events, that doesn't happen, and he is confronted by both Azula and Iroh, and is given one last ultimatum. He can prove that he is content with his life and the decisions he has made and help the Avatar, or help Azula capture and defeat the Avatar and go back to the Fire Nation. Both Iroh and Azula want to prove that his time away meant something. And after everything that has happened, and everything you have seen Zuko go through in this season, with Iroh by his side for the most of it, and Iroh pleading with him, you realize that he can never escape the mark left on him, because he joins Azula to attack the Avatar. This is one of the best twists in any show, because you don't see it coming the first time, but after watching it again, I believe Zuko was never truly happy with his life. He really wanted to be, and he tried to make it look that way, but it was just never that convincing. But you still want him to be happy and want him to make the right decision. So to see him ignore what he has learned and the development he has had throughout the season and not only go back on it, but use all of it to defeat the Avatar and turn his back on his uncle is so upsetting, but in an incredibly powerful way that does feel justified in the worst possible way. It's such a complex moment and is one of the show's best. And through this fight, which is the best of the entire season, Aang also has to make a decision when they're surrounded by the Dai Li if he wants to go on fighting an unwinnable battle or take the one shot he has and give up his attachments to this world to save Katara. and after coming to a previous decision, as I said earlier in the episode, which has been built up to since the beginning, he does what he has to do. And this is what I find so cool, because both Aang and Zuko's stories parallel each other so much throughout the season, right up until the end. They both make decisions that you honestly might not agree with, but understand how they came to it. And what's so interesting is they're both such complex decisions that have so many ramifications for them and the entire world, but they both have to make them, and in the end, their decisions end up blowing up in their face. Aang gets nearly murdered and has to flee the city with the help of the man whose advice he ignored, with Ba Sing Se falling and everything he did and learned throughout the season kind of being for nothing, at least at the moment. But he has a chance to fight another day, so he might be able to make some meaning out of it. And Zuko doesn't get to capture the Avatar thanks to the man who made him, who he stabbed in the back, and is now unsure what his future holds for him and still isn't satisfied, but now doesn't have Uncle Iroh by his side and is going back to the people who used and betrayed him. And both these things, both Aang and Zuko's stories, get explored more next season after this crushing ending. But this is the peak of the show, and is truly my favorite finale of any season, which is fitting that it would come from this one. And I'll wrap it up here. Season 2 is one of the best seasons of any show that takes you to so many different places and has so many amazing episodes, and while the tales of Ba Sing Se and Zuko alone might stand better on their own, there is no other episode that ends its season on such a perfect note as this one does. And in the end, I could only give the #1 spot to the episode that explores Season 2's themes to the fullest, which the finale certainly does. The Crossroads of Destiny, the best episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Season 2. And with that, the list is done. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this, please leave a like and subscribe for more content similar to this in the future. I'm in the works of making more videos, including big lists about the top 5 best and worst episodes of SpongeBob Season 4, which should come out in March, and some smaller videos about shows I'm watching all the way through for the first time, like Breaking Bad and Courage the Cowardly Dog. So if that sounds interesting to you, any support would be very appreciated. Also, please leave a comment telling me what you thought of my list and what your own would have been. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Also, links to music I used in this video and other videos on my channel are in the description. All images and music used in this video belong to their respected creators. And with all that said, more videos are on the way, and happy Valentine's Day. I'm gonna go watch my favorite Hey Arnold episode, Arnold's Valentines, once I get out of school, sadly. And until next time, this is Chocolate Guy, signing off.